All right, let's start up with Windows security settings here. Missing quite a few. For Windows security settings, our main objective is to be able to define the different types of users, describe what Ntfs, or the new technology file system, very creative, and how it intends to address these security threats. Compare and contrast the various Ntfs file permissions and describe what single sign-on or Bitlocker and Efs are. Obviously, there's different types of user accounts and groups within Windows. We have our administrative accounts, we have our guest accounts, we have power users, we have backup users. We have a plethora of type of groups that are out there. We need to be able to identify those and apply them as necessary. As for the new Ntfs, is the file system obviously that Windows uses to store and retrieve files for security purposes. It sets setting of permissions of drives, files, folders, and can ensure that you're more secure than the old Windows. The prior Windows didn't have that much security compared to this one. And Ntfs has both local and network users based on given granted permissions. Be read, write, read, execute, list your folder contents only, which basically only get to see what's in there. You won't be able to read the file, but you can see what's inside the folders. Modify, full control. And then you have special permissions. In reference to single sign-on through Windows, it enables users to be able to connect multiple applications in the network that use the common authentication mechanism. So as soon as I sign on once, I don't have to sign on again to these different places. Obviously, it reduces the password fatigue. Therefore, it retains the security and the complexity of the passwords. Now, we don't have to be worried about that the guy is using the same exact password to get in, because now we're forcing them anyways, because there's only one way to sign in, which is a single sign-on. And it reduces the IT cost related to the help desk tickets of everybody forgetting what their password was for this system, that system. And you'll be surprised at the end of the month when everybody's calling in the help desk, asking for them their password to be changed. As for a given group, the group is a container that holds the actual user accounts. You should be always creating a group first and putting the user inside the group. Never give rights to the user. Never, ever. Never, ever? Yeah, never, ever. Why is this? Because obviously it gets very tedious when that person leaves that department, goes to another department. I got to go into all those different locations to add that one user. While now, if I have a marketing group, I have an accounting group, I have an HR group, it doesn't matter where you go. All I have to do is remove you from this group and add you to this group, and everything that that group already has, you're going to have. Obviously, there is administrator group, power users. You have regular users, and you have your guest group. The guest group is not very used at all. That you could throw away into the garbage. It should be disabled. The guest account and all guest groups shouldn't be used at all. That is not something that we want to use. As for regular users group, we do want to create. Power user group is only used for certain users. Sometimes those are the developers or people that are in the IT field that require certain access to be able to complete their jobs. Your administrator group, that is the Meeking Bing, the guy with the big bucks and is able to get into anywhere. He has the privilege to, from the smallest tasks all the way up to deleting everything, taking control of any folder, and being able to do anything he wants. Obviously, this is very strongly discouraged to give anyone this access. As we said before, there is now an extra ID that that person should have and only use it when they need to do administrative jobs. As for the power users, this gives the users to read, write, and permissions to the system, allowing them to install software, but keeps them from changing the actual operating system or installing a new device in it. As I said before, usually these are for the people that are your programmers, or maybe your junior administrators, where they shouldn't have full access to all these systems. Any questions between the administrator and your power user group? Your user group, that's the guy who usually you're going to give, and as I said, that's usually going to be a group, marketing, accounting, based on the actual department. There is different types, obviously. Don't get me wrong, there is the MAC. You want to know what the MAC is? Mandatory access control. And there is ones like the ones that have to do with your actual the Army uses it. In other words, you know, your Secret Service levels and stuff like that. So based on your actual clearance level, they'll give you your rights. But in this case, in the majority of places that you're going to be working with is going to be departmental, right? As for your guest one, this is basically an exception. It shouldn't be used at all. This account is basically created by default, and it should be disabled. Best reason to make these for these people are just when they're only going to be accessing a limited time. You wouldn't give this to an intern because once again, it gives them only limited amount of access to these systems, and it could create problems where they can't get into certain things. Just put them into their user group, and if anything, make sure you have maybe their ID since that person that is going to be leaving by a certain time, just put that his ID is going to be expiring at a certain time. Any questions or doubts on your user groups or your guest group? As for configuring user and groups, every version of Windows includes 1 or 2 user and groups. Most editions have it inside the control panel called user accounts, and more advanced ones called the local user and groups. As for in the domain, you would do it in the domain server and set these people's IDs and their privileges. Any questions? Doubts? Windows Vista, 7 user accounts. You have your administrator, you have your standard user, and you have your guest accounts. Only one, and it should be disabled. Question on user accounts. Administrator.
They don't get power users, or is that only for like a higher level?
These are the standard 3 that it usually supports. That's it. This is a Windows Vista and 7.
Okay, so Windows 7 doesn't support power users.
Not a domain. Not on a domain. I mean, it has to be on a domain.
Oh, it has to be domain. Okay.
This is a Windows 7 regular one. Questions or doubts? Windows 8, 8.1. It has obviously the ability to allow you to sign in with your Microsoft account. You can have a local account, and you can have a child account. These are, again, not on a domain itself. These are just a normal one. The very dangerous part about the Microsoft account is that if you don't have access to the internet, you won't be able to authenticate. So be careful using these Microsoft accounts, because that could create problems. I tend to always use a local account and sign into the OneDrive if I want to. Great thing about the child count is that you can set the time of day that they can come in, just like in a domain server where you can actually set certain users only to be able to access certain things. The same thing here, it allows you also to use the ESRB ratings of these websites and of the applications that they're using, and based on their age, it will allow or disallow them to be able to use these given applications, or the time frame of them being able to use it. Windows 10 accounts allows you to add with ease family members. You can also have the child accounts and stuff like that with no problems. Questions or doubts? Look and feels a little bit different. That's all it is. UAC. Be very careful on ever turning this off on a user. If you see here, the UAC is intended to prevent unintentional or unauthorized changes. When it comes to those pop unders, when it comes to these little Trojan horses or stuff that's being actually installed without them noticing, this little guy will help you out. It'll actually prompt the users to basically log in. UAC was introduced in Vista and works both in standard and administrative accounts. It doesn't matter if you are an administrator, it will ask you if you have it high enough. Obviously, you make the less UAC less aggressive. You put it the way if you put it never notify, it's basically just going to install everything. It's never going to tell you anything. It'll do anything that the computer asks. Based on always notify, which is the highest one, will not let you do anything. Any questions on the different levels? Parental controls, as I stated before. The administrator can monitor and limit the activities of a standard user. You can actually set the time of days, the games. You can also say which programs you can block and your game ratings and program limits. All this within this screen. Any questions or doubts on parental controls? Ntfs is a new technology file system, because that's just a beautiful name. Was introduced in Windows NT to handle the growing disk space, security concerns, and the need for more stability compared to the old Windows. Ntfs files, directories, and volumes can each have their own security. Ntfs security is very flexible and is built in within Windows. It's possible to convert FAT32 to Ntfs without losing any of your data. But the operation is not reversible. You've gone into Ntfs, you can't go back. So what are they here in Ntfs security? What it brings is it brings permissions, as we said, file permissions, directory permissions, single sign-on, Bitlocker, and Efs. As for your Ntfs, Christina, help us out here.
Ntfs permissions. Share permissions apply only when a user is accessing a file or folder through the network. Local permissions and attributes are used to protect the file when the user is local. Ntfs permissions can protect at the file level, while share permissions can be applied to the directory level only. Ntfs permissions can affect users logged on locally or across the network to the system where the Ntfs permissions are applied. Share permissions are in effect only when the user connects to the resource via network.
Any questions in the local versus share? All right, next one. As for Ntfs, it has the allow, not allow, and or deny permissions. You have inheriting down through all subfolders, as I said, down. That's where I get always the word, because that's how they call it. You go into each subfolder, you're actually going down. Unless if you actually change it yourself, it is inherited. Just like you inherit your bloodline, you would inherit security rights down from the parent folder to the child folders. As for the cumulative, is if a user is a member of a group that has read permissions and a member of a write permissions, they will have both read and write. So be careful where you put these people when you put these different types of groups. They will always inherit all their rights, and it is cumulative. You won't give them only read, for instance, just because they were on one group that's read. Any questions? Ntfs, Pablo, a copy.
All right. A copy of a file will generally have the permissions assigned to it that are placed on newly created files in that folder, regardless of what permissions were on the original file. A moved file, on the other hand, will attempt to keep the same permissions as it had in the original location. Folder copy and move operations follow similar guidelines to those with files.
And we need to be very careful when we're moving information. When we move information from one folder to another, it will bring the original security measure. And what I mean by that is that, let's say wherever you move this information to, if that computer does not have the SID or the information of that, you may basically lock the user out of their own files. Usually they say to copy things, unless if, obviously you want to move it to a given folder, then that's your prerogative. But that is the variance. As for copy, when you throw it into there, whatever that folder has, it will inherit the folder that you're throwing it into. Versus when you move it, it will move everything, including the security, over. Any questions on copy versus move? Okay, you have your different ones. As I said, full control, that shouldn't be done unless if the person, let's say the user's folder, his user's folder, yes, he has full control by default. But you don't want to give him access to the server with full control. This means that he can take ownership. Taking ownership is basically, he can lock out any administrator. He can lock you out. He can even lock out the system from there. It happened. Read means that he can actually read and view the files and see the attributes. Read and execute means he can actually execute or double click on it to open the exe. If he's not able to execute the file, he won't be able to. Write means he's able to overwrite or do what he needs in reference to the file itself. Modify combines the read and execute permissions with write permissions and allows the user to also delete the file. Notice none of the other ones except for full control allows you to do that. Questions or doubts on full control, read and execute, write, or modify? Questions? Everybody's in Ntfs. Here he is. Be very careful. Never remove the system from having full control. The system is obviously equivalent to being the kernel at the shell level, right? So that if the user removes the system from this folder, it won't be able to do certain things with the folder if it needs to. Same thing with administrators. Make sure they always have the administrator group, not a person, but a group, should have full control to folders. Any questions or doubts? With these here, as you can see, you can hit edit to change the permissions, and you can go into the advanced there. When you go into the advanced, you'll be able to say that it's inheriting it from above, from its parent, and or remove inheritance from its parents to be able to tweak that given folder or file. That is basically where you go. Any questions? If I just want to edit it, I can edit it. But if I want to remove its inheritance, I go into advanced. The directory permissions, pretty much the same, more or less. You have still the full control, which gives full control. They can take ownership of the directory or its contents within it, change anything they want within it. Read only allows you to read the entire directory structure, view the contents within it, files, and see who's the owner and attributes. As for read and execute, same thing. You'll be able to read, list those contents, add to be able to run executables within the folder. Write allows the user to create new stuff within the folder, create a brand new Excel sheet or whatever it is that you want inside that given folder. As for the list folder, only allows the viewer to be able to list and view the contents. Can't be able to actually see the files inside, but they can see the actual full list of the folder itself and everything that's in it. Modify combines a read and execute permission with the write permission and further allows them to also delete everything, including subfolders. As you can see, this is pretty much the same thing. The only variance is you have the list folder contents as an extra thing here. The same thing comes to the actual folder itself. You can click on advanced, or if you just want to edit here. But if you want to remove any inheritance from its parent, you can go into the advanced. And the same thing, you could actually push it down to all the subfolders within the advanced menu. Questions? Doubts? Single sign-on. This is the purpose of single sign-on, is to authenticate and give users access to applications and systems that they need with only one logon. This SSO is used in many environments, including Kerberos, the Microsoft Active Directory, Novell eDirectory, which I didn't see many Novell servers lately, some certificate model implementations, the same thing, and even some certain websites and or applications can have SSO. There are many benefits, obviously, for the SSO. It reduces the password fatigue. Therefore, there's no more the excuse that I have to put my little diary somewhere or my little post-it with all these usernames and passwords because I only have one ID and password. It saves, obviously, time and re-entering and authenticating to different applications, and reduces the cost of the amount of times that the help desk has to reset users' password because they're forgetting what their password is because they actually didn't write it in their little diary or they didn't put it in a little post-it note. So now they can't remember what their password is. That one is Bitlocker. Pablo.
Bitlocker. Bitlocker is the whole sorry. Bitlocker is the whole drive encryption tool that can also seal a device such that it will not boot if any system files are altered. It can also lock the drive to a particular machine, preventing stealing the drive and connecting to another device. Bitlocker to Go provides the same encryption technology to help prevent unauthorized access to the files stored on removable drives.
You need to be careful with Bitlocker because Bitlocker has two colors, right? We have the one where it uses a TPM, and the other one, if your UEFI BIOS and or PC does not have a TPM, you need a key. If you don't have that key and you want to decrypt the drive afterwards, because let's say something's happened to the information, you want to decrypt it. Without that key or the printout of the key, you're pretty much not going to be able to get into that drive. Usually the ones that we want to put this into are the ones that have a TPM already. That'll facilitate the ease for the users for encrypting and decrypting drives. What's the good thing about a TPM?
Well, if you try tampering with it, it will delete everything. It's also more convenient as well. It stores everything there.
The encryption is done within the motherboard and it is completely offhand compared to the other one is software based. This is actually hardware based. So it encrypts and decrypts. Its key is internal within the TPM module itself. That is a variance, yeah. EFS, Encryption File System, is an encryption tool built in with Windows. It's not the same thing as the actual BitLocker. It allows users to encrypt files that can be decrypted only by the user who encrypted the files. It can be only used on Ntfs volumes, but it is very simple to use. As you can see, you can just go into the advanced attributes of the folder or the file and encrypt its contents with no check mark. Questions? Doubts?
I have a question. If a user uses this encryption tool, is it possible for admin to take ownership of the file and change that, or it's just only the user that knows the password?
I believe you should, as an administrator, be able to take control of that. So we can double check that to make sure that I'm aware of you. If you are administrator, you have full rights. So you should be able.
That's what I'm thinking, but at the same time, if you encrypt it and you know the key and the admin doesn't, that means there has to be an override or a backdoor.
We can test on a lab that I'm aware of. It doesn't ask you for a key.
Oh, I thought it does. Never mind. I never used it. I thought that's what it was referring to. Because if you encrypt
It's the
something, you
user
need a
ID,
key.
the one that's encrypting it. So what happens is that if another user logs on remotely to that folder, let's say that this was on their given folder on a server and that he encrypted it, another user won't be able to see the contents of that. It's encrypted.
Oh, I see. I meant admin should be able to. I agree. He just needs to use the user's ID as a decrypting key.
Yes. I'm aware. You won't be able, that I'm aware of, you won't be able to, unless something's changed, from an administrator, remove them from an EFS. The one that does is Bitlocker. That's encrypting the whole drive. That requires a special key to decrypt it. As for EFS, you will not be able to prevent any administrators to be able to get into those confidential files. All right. So let's practice here. Teresa, help me out here and read this one.
A CEO of a small company with 25 employees is asking you to make security recommendations for the entire company. You will need to develop a company-wide security plan that includes permissions and restrictions. In a group of 6, prepare a 2-minute presentation to explain the security features from Ntfs you are recommending to the CEO. Make sure you include why you are recommending them, as well as how they will help secure this company. You will have 5 minutes to plan your presentation. You can use a computer to show how your feature works.
Okay. I'll open it up and allow you guys to work as a group together. Let's see. I'll put you all together since this is a little bit complicated. And am I missing somebody? Oh, no, I just missed a click of the button, that's all. Any questions or doubts on this little practice here? All right, here we are. Resuming here. Go ahead, I guess. Who would like to give their CEO speech here?
So we did it as a group and we decided to do a PowerPoint.
Okay.
So I'm not sure which screen this is going to let me put it on. Let me see. Reading mode. Here we go. So let me share this. All right. Ntfs. Why should we use Ntfs? So NTF is easy to start with. Directory file permissions can be easily set. You can either have full control, which is a good role for admins. You can have modify roles for supervisors. You can have read and execute for users. The whole point is having a group base, so it's easier for us to manage users. And it's also easier for us to make sure data goes where it needs to be accessed. The reason why this is secured is that your data is role-based. So people who shouldn't be able to see it, you know, other users for different departments won't be able to access that data. So this is a good way for us to easily manage that. Another thing that's really good with Ntfs, it has great encryption tools. One that's very good is Bitlocker. Bitlocker is an incredible encryption tool that works by encrypting the whole drive. There are some caveats. You do have to have some things enabled. You need to have a TPM chip that is able to basically help encrypt and decrypt the drive when we need to use it. Luckily, we can use Bitlocker to go if we don't have a TPM available. That also works as well. So as long as we have that, even if the criminal takes our computer, our data should be safe as long as we have the key. If they can't decrypt that little BitLocker, our data should be safe. Another extra security feature that Ntfs has is EFC. This enables us to encrypt single folders or files. So just extra protection if we need to select certain folders for whatever application we have. And also we have SSO. Thanks to how permissions work on Ntfs, it can be added on as a group allowing SSO. SSO means single sign-on, allowing users to use one password for all the content that the Ntfs was set up for. Since Ntfs can have groups, users just need to be allowed to access the file from permissions. Using groups will be the easiest way and allows us to remove the users if we must. And that's our 2-minute presentation.
Thank you. As for the encryption itself for BitLocker, you don't need really BitLocker to go. You could have a key if you don't have a TPM. BitLocker to go is for the USB or the actual drives that you'll be connecting. BitLocker has a feature to actually create a key instead of you using the TPM to create the key. Thank you very much. That was very good. Okay, so let's get to our questions of the day. Number 1, which type of user accounts does Windows 7 support? Choose all that apply. A is standard, B is limited, C is visitor, and D is administrator. Which ones are in here which are standard within Windows 7?
I say A and D.
Everyone agree?
Yes.
Number 2, which of the following is not true about a user's account and groups? A user account can belong to only one group at a time. B, by default, standard users accounts belong to the user's group. C, guest group has limited rights on the system. Or D, backup operators can restore files regardless of the group's permission. Which one is not true?
A.
Yes, a user can belong to only one group at a time is false. As we stated, he could be in several groups, and depending on the combination of all the groups that he's in, he will or she will receive the rights that pertain to that area. Number 3, you move a file from one folder to another. Which statement is true? A, the file will inherit the permissions from the new folder. B, the file will receive default permissions. C, the file will maintain its original permissions. Or D, the file will not be accessible. You move it from one location to another.
Is it C?
Yes, he will maintain original permissions. Versus when you copy, it will then get the folder that you throw it into and put its actual rights from that given folder. Number 4, in order to prevent other users from editing files in C files folder, which of the following steps should be taken? A, set NTFS permissions to read only. B, set the folder index files for search. C, set the local administrator as the owner of the folder. Or D, set the network permissions, share permissions to read only. In order to prevent other users from editing files in C files, which should you take? Yes, set
I agree.
permissions to read only. I'm sorry, somebody said something else?
No, I said I agree.
Oh, all right. Cool. Why not set the network share permissions to read only?
Because if you have direct access to the computer, you still have permission.
Correct. If you want to prevent anyone from editing, it would be setting it directly to the NT permissions, not the network share. Number 5, which of the following Windows features would be used to encrypt a single file or folder? A, Ntfs, B, EFS, C, Bitlocker, or D, security? Here we go.
B.
Yes. Okay, Alexa. It is EFS, correct. Why not Bitlocker?
Bitlocker encrypts the whole drive.
Okay. That is all she wrote, ladies and gentlemen.